bringing together voices in child and youth healthcare. This is CAFC Presents.
CAFC would like to thank the following member organizations for their generous support of our knowledge translation activities: the IWK Health Centre, the Children's Health Foundation of London, the McMaster Children's Hospital Foundation, the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario Research Institute, the Children's Hospital Foundation of Manitoba, the Montreal Children's Hospital Foundation, and the Holland Bloorview Children's Rehabilitation Hospital Foundation. We would also like to thank the following Keystone partners for their ongoing contributions that support all of CAFC's programs and activities. And for this episode, we'd also like to thank Icaria, now part of Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals, for supporting our webinar program, and in particular to this three-part series on patient safety. Icaria has been a supporter of the CAFC conference for the last couple of years, and we look forward to welcoming them and their colleagues from Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals to the 2015 CAFC annual conference in Quebec City, where they'll be hosting a breakfast session where they're going to invite delegates to continue this dialogue around patient safety. So thanks to Icaria and Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals. All right, hello and welcome to today's episode of CAFC Presents. My name is Doug Maynard and I'm the Associate Director at CAFC, the Canadian Association of Pediatric Health Centres. And today's webinar is titled Patient Safety by Design, which is part 2 of this 3-part series on patient safety. Part 1 from a few weeks back brought us Drs. Trey Coffey and Kaveh Shojania to walk us through the past 15 years of the patient safety movement, and they really did a great job of shining a light on where we might have fallen short of expectations as far as making improvements, but also left us with a lot of great examples of successes and opportunities to continue to improve safety and quality for our children. So now it's my pleasure to introduce today's panel. First up, we have Wayne Ho, who is currently the Managing Principal of Healthcare Human Factors in Toronto. For the past 15 years, he has focused on the interaction between people and technology as an interaction designer and usability specialist. He's passionate about improving the design of software, devices, and processes in healthcare. So it's great to have Wayne here bringing a really unique perspective. And then following Wayne, we have Kim Streitenberger, who is a registered nurse with more than 33 years of clinical quality improvement and patient safety experience. And we did lots of great work with Kim back when she was at Sick Kids, the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, working on various patient safety projects around medication reconciliation and lots of other stuff back then. Kim joined ISMP Canada in 2007 as a patient safety consultant with a focus on MedRec, and returned to ISMP Canada in 2014 and is currently a project lead with a focus on health product labeling and packaging. So it's great to have Kim back. So it's now my pleasure to hand the virtual podium over to start the session off over to Wayne Ho. Over to you, Wayne.
All right. Are you able to see my slides now, Doug, and everyone?
Yeah, we can see them. They look great.
All right, excellent, great. Okay, thanks. So I'm going to talk a little bit about healthcare and human factors, but before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about human factors in general. I'll start with a story. Unfortunately, it's a true story, and this is really about the deadliest friendly fire incident in the War of Afghanistan that was triggered back in December, back in 2001, by a simple act of a U.S. Special Forces air controller changing the battery on a global positioning system he was using to target the Taliban outposts north of Kandahar. So 3 Special Forces soldiers were killed and 20 were injured when a 2,000-pound satellite-guided bomb landed not on the Taliban outpost, but on a battalion command post occupied by American forces and a group of Afghan allies, including Hamid Karzai, who was to become the Prime Minister of Afghanistan. So this Air Force combat controller was using this precision lightweight GPS receiver that you can see on the screen to calculate the Taliban's coordinates for a B-52 attack. And so it's sort of a laser-guided thing that you point to where you want the bomb to land. Now, the unfortunate thing that happened is that the controller did not realize that after he changed the device's battery, the machine was programmed to automatically come back on displaying coordinates of its own location. And so when they changed the battery, the default location was itself. And really that doesn't make any sense. And so you can think about the way the designers might have gone through this is that originally GPS was used to tell where you were, where you're located, where something was. But this had a very different purpose. And so the defaults were all wrong. And they hadn't really considered that in a stressful condition such as in a military situation, that if you were to change the battery, which could very well happen, that you should never default to something as dangerous as that. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about human factors and give you an introduction to it. So again, my name is Wayne Ho, and Healthcare Human Factors, a team that I'm managing, is a group of about 25 or 30 to 30 human factor specialists, designers, clinical engineers at the University Health Network. So we're actually located right in the Toronto General Hospital. And our mission is to improve healthcare for people through safe, usable, and effective technologies and processes. And our vision is a healthcare system that really at every stage in its process is informed by human factors principles. Okay, so what's human factors? Well, human factors is the study of the interaction of people and technology with the goal of optimizing human well-being and overall system performance. And really, this is important because as technology continues to advance at a rapid pace, it's really easy for people to become overwhelmed. So let's touch back at this GPS battery replacement issue. And the interesting thing, as a result of this particular incident, it's interesting to note that the Air Force really blamed the incident on human error and not on the device itself. So Air Force officials were saying, we have a serious training problem that needs to be corrected. Other people would say we need to know how our equipment works. When the battery is changed, it defaults to its own location. And we've got to make sure our people understand this. So they're blaming, again, the people that to have caused this, but really there is no questioning about whether or not there was a problem with the design itself. Let's look at something a little bit more mundane, a little bit older. So those that have been around a little bit longer, such as myself, may remember the Palm Pilot or the Palm devices. And I'm sure a number of people probably owned this device. And I owned it myself, and it was probably one of the first devices that was trying to do away without paper, and you could set your calendar, schedule, and so forth. But a lot of people owned the first Palm device, but really not a lot of people owned a second one. So it seemingly was an innovative device at the time. Perhaps wasn't as innovative and usable as we had thought. And really part of the problem was that it forced us to relearn the most basic human skills that we learned in grade school, which was writing, for example. And if you recall, you had to use this sort of pseudo-English alphabet, which was called graffiti. And eventually this got superseded by the BlackBerry, where it's shown that keyboards and thumbs seem to work pretty well, and people would type quite quickly on a keyboard and such. So it's an interesting human factors issue here. And really that example, both the GPS military example as well as the Palm Pilot, really I think represents some of the attitudes and so forth that designers and engineers often have when designing medical devices and other devices and systems in general. And this 1933 slogan from Chicago's World Fair, I think, represents that attitude quite well, that science finds, industry applies, and man conforms. Well, we at Healthcare Human Factors here at UHN, well, we subscribe to this motto, a more person-centered motto that Don Norman had presented, which is people propose, science studies, and technology conforms. And frankly, it's because technology is a lot easier to change, and really, it's really hard for people to change. In fact, humans really don't. There are really well-known human limitations in around behavior, attention, in other words. That's really quite well defined, but the interaction between humans and technology is not really well understood, and it's really quite complicated. So let's talk a little bit about human limitations. Well, we know that we have quite a limited attention. So, we're not particularly good at driving while speaking on the phone. A lot of us might think we are, but we're really not. And distracted driving is becoming a significant problem. In fact, a bigger problem than drunk driving is now. We have a limited number of attention resources. The more attention we're paying to one thing, the less we're able to pay to something else. And we have limited memory. Well, our short-term memory, we can really only hold 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information at a time without memory aids such as repetition, lists, reminders, and that sort of thing. And we have other inherent limitations. We get tired. We're not particularly good at multitasking. We perform more poorly when we have insufficient sleep. And we have a lot of biases, and they might be social biases, such as in-group bias. We might believe that people like us are good. We have omission biases, where we tend to favor doing nothing instead of something that is potentially harmful. There's all sorts of biases that we have, and that really comes into play in how we interact with systems. And sorry about that, guys. I think I'll try to cancel this call here. I don't know why it's doing that. Okay, hold on. Sorry. Apologies for that. Okay, so this is particularly important from a design of healthcare technology. So human factors is really important. Let me show you a video that demonstrates some of the work that we've been doing here at Healthcare Human Factors over the years. And it gives you a sense of where things are at. And in many cases, there are a lot of challenges. And that's because we're not really considering the design of technology and how people's limitations affect the interaction. So let's show you this video. And hopefully it does stream relatively well for you on this webinar.
Did that automatically delete everything I just programmed in?
This is the most complicated thing I've ever seen.
So this machine is a backbreaker. It's noticed. We need a chair to program these things.
Oh my goodness. All right.
That's crazy.
No. Way too confusing. It's killing me.
I don't know what's going on. Oh, shucks. Oh, why is it this old?
50 items in, I've got to choose you and volume when I got the weddings. Yeah.
This is not
Front. Oh, you have to put them on the front and back?
See? This is cool. I'm sorry. I find this is not user friendly at all.
I just wish I could edit here. I don't understand why this is so complicated.
I'm feeling so stupid.
That's dangerous.
Okay, so that gives you an idea of some of the things that we've encountered here in our usability labs here at Healthcare Human Factors in Toronto General. And you know, the interesting thing is one of the participants in one of the usability studies sort of said that, oh, I feel really stupid. But one thing to keep in mind is that all these people here are not stupid. In fact, they're some of the smartest people that we've encountered. They're heads of anesthesiology, heads of departments, and so forth within hospitals across the city. And these are people that are real users that are working with actual systems and technologies that are in the real world, unfortunately, in some cases. And there's a lot of really significant challenges using these systems in actual environments. And so what we do at Healthcare Human Factors is work with manufacturers and with system designers, as well as our clinicians and patients and so forth, to evaluate our systems and usability tests that allow us to get a sense of where there might be real risks and hazards associated with usage. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But let me ask, or perhaps you can think, how many of you have been to places like Trenton, Ontario, or perhaps Powell River, British Columbia, or some of these other towns? And these are towns that are in around the 20,000 in terms of population. And well, in Canada, Baker and Norton reported that range of people, you know, the size of the town of Trenton, Ontario, that's the number of people that die every year in the year 2000 when they did the study in Canada due to preventable unintended adverse events. And we contend that many of these preventable deaths are a direct result of poor healthcare technology design. And there's numbers that are proportional also that are like this in the United States, where 44,000 to 90,000 people in the United States are also dying because of preventable medical error. And that's really bringing in regulators like the FDA to step in to try to ensure that medical devices that are coming to market are in fact safe and effective for use. And in fact, they're requiring in the United States that medical devices may not be approved for sale unless manufacturers are able to show that they're following human factors methodology, as well as in fact proving using that methodology that the devices are safe and effective for use. So it's gotten to that point where the FDA has had to step in, and since 2009 or so, they're starting to enforce this guidance, and they have an updated guidance as of 2011 that really requires manufacturers to apply 3 factors to optimize their medical device design. So how can medical device companies and hospitals try to ensure that we're bringing in safe and effective products? Well, it's important to, for example, when you're procuring products, to ensure that the products that you're buying as hospitals are following user-centered design processes and are really considering human factors as part of their process. And so, to give you a bit of a sense of our process, which is a user-centered design process, what we recommend to our device manufacturer partners that we work with is that they do user research and understand how users actually use their systems in healthcare environments. And to take that information into the concept design and prototype design stages, and then to evaluate that regularly with actual end users, such as in the videos that you saw earlier. So to give you a sense of what that is ethnography is really just a simple observation of intended users in their actual work environments. And so manufacturers, health IT companies, and so forth that really should be looking at these sort of real observations to understand, to drive the design of systems. And I'm going to skip past some of these slides, so I just want to make sure we have time to get through everything. But there's certain techniques that we need to follow in order to design with simplicity in mind. And you might remember that we had systems like MSN and AOL that were really complex in terms of search. But what Google came out with was something that was much simpler, which really focused on search itself, and not a lot of extra information that got in the way. Okay, so what's another technique that can be used besides things like ethnography and observation? Once you actually have done your designs and concepts, it's important to evaluate the systems in actual environments. And so usability evaluation is really important. And as I mentioned before, we actually do have labs here within the Toronto General Hospital where we test and evaluate systems with actual users. So we evaluate the usability of systems with low or high fidelity prototypes. And that could be from paper to actual systems. We bring in representative users, whether that be nurses, surgeons, or otherwise, and we have them step through actual scenarios, and we record the audio and video and really capture things such as use errors, close calls, or other hazards that might come up, other risks, and so forth. In our labs, we have the ability we have one-way mirrors, and we have the actual simulated environment on the other side. As you can see, some of our human factor specialists taking some notes from a study. It happens to be a prototype of an infusion pump there. And we have the ability to simulate lots of different types of environments. This happens to be an ICU environment, but we can also evaluate operating room types of environment, patient wards. We even have the fuselage of a U.S. Army medical helicopter simulated in our lab so that we can evaluate a portable ICU unit. And of course, once we have feedback from our usability testing, it's really important to then bring that back into the design. And we really want to make sure we follow certain guidelines to ensure that things are consistent, that there's appropriate feedback. We're accounting for potential distractions and interruptions that might happen in hospital environments and support the actual workflow. Okay, so now I want to change gears a little bit and talk a little bit about a case study. And this is a case study that we were involved in conjunction with some partners at Mount Sinai Hospital as well. And so just to give you a bit of background around this particular study, this was related, and this happened after procurement of a dry lithium heparinized syringe that was used for the purpose of arterial blood gas sampling at the hospital. And there was a near-miss event at the neonatal intensive care unit where this particular syringe was nearly prepared for injection. And of course, that could have quite catastrophic effects on someone in the NICU. So, concerns were raised that there was a really similar look and feel to these particular arterial blood gas syringes and, a standard 3 mil Lure lock or slip tip syringe, which could cause confusion in the NICU and could, of course, cause hazards or risk for patient safety. And so if you actually mistakenly use an ABG syringe instead of a standard Lure lock syringe, well, these heparinized syringes can lead to a variety of adverse outcomes, including serious bleeding and other heparin-induced issues and conditions. So we wanted to run a study, a blinded experiment, and what we did is have 14 representative end users, so that was including respiratory therapists, registered nurses, physicians, and they performed tasks in a high-fidelity simulation in order to assess the heparinized syringe safety within the appropriate context of use, so an actual environment. So the evaluation was really assessing the distinguishability. Could people recognize recognize that there was an ABG syringe versus a standard syringe within their packaging, and also removed from packaging, and also to detect the syringe prepared, the detectability of the syringe prepared, the procedures in which the non-heparinized syringe was required. Okay, so the results were really quite astounding, and in the majority of the scenarios, we found that users were not able to distinguish the heparinized syringes from the non-heparinized syringes. And error is perpetuated through all stages of the patient care, all the way from supply stocking through to feed preparation and administration. So we really saw that it was pretty high error rate. And as you can see here, this is a breakdown of all the participants in the cases of the different types of scenarios, as I mentioned, between delivery, feed preparation, saline installation, all the way down through general anesthesia. You can see where the X's mark cases where they were unable to distinguish the difference between the heparinized syringe and the standard syringe. So you can imagine if there was an accidental mix-up in terms of the location of the syringes, there would be no easy way to detect that they had the wrong syringe there. So as a result of this study, really the errors observed in the simulation study, it was really concluded that these syringes do in fact pose a significant patient safety risk in the NICU patient population. And so in this particular hospital, the syringes were removed from the care area, and the manufacturer was notified and debriefed about the results of the study. And really, this simulation research allowed the stakeholders to investigate and really quantify how much risk there really was and whether there was a serious safety concern or not, and then take action, and then bring this back to the manufacturer to either look at having them change the design or perhaps move to a different supplier, a different manufacturer. And so that's a bit of an example in terms of how human factors really does play a role. And really, I do want to end in a bit of a more positive note, but that, there's certainly lots of technical advances in medicine that have enabled us to improve the quality of life for people in ways that we haven't imagined. And a lot of the technology is really helping to improve the quality and safety of patients in our hospitals. And so it's an exciting, inspiring field to be working in because of the possibilities, but it's so critical to, when designing these new technologies, that we do consider human factors and the human limitations that we all have around tension, memory, how we're interrupted, and so forth. Because without considering those things, we may not be developing, designing, or procuring systems as simple as syringes that are safe and effective for our actual use in our actual hospitals, in our actual environments. Just wanted to thank you for your time and pass the time back to Doug.
All right, thank you, Wayne. Great presentation, a great video. We had a comment came in from Dr. Coffey that this video really resonated with her, and I noticed you didn't put at the end of that video that no machines were harmed during the making of that video, so I'm assuming that if we watched the full video that perhaps there were some machines getting harmed.
Yeah, some people probably are tempted to hit or throw the machine, so we usually stop them from doing that if possible.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And if anyone else does have any questions for Wayne, we will be coming back for questions at the end after we hear from Kim Streitenberger. But for now, we're going to go I'm not sure exactly where both of you are. I know you're both in Toronto, so I'm not sure if it's north, south, east, or west from where you are, Wayne. But we're going over to Kim at ISMP Canada to give her presentation. Over to you, Kim.
Oh, thanks, Doug. I'm actually just trying to pull it up, and I don't know if you can see it. I can't. There. There we go. I'm actually north of Wayne, just for information. And it's equally important to consider human factors in the design of labels and packages of health products for safety. And so that's really what I'm sort of expand on some of what Wayne said, but apply it specifically to labels and packages. Just one quick disclosure before I get started, and I know Doug spoke to this earlier, but we did receive an unrestricted educational grant from Icaria Canada to support this particular presentation. So the label and package are really the first points of interaction between a health product and a healthcare professional, patient, or consumer. And as a result, these human factors or human factor knowledge can play a really important role in designing labels and packages that minimize the risk of patient harm. And it's important that health product labels and packages are really designed with the user in mind and with consideration to how and where the product will actually be used at the point of care or the point of administration or selection and so on. In healthcare, we know that errors can have substantially different consequences depending on the characteristics of the product involved in the error. And for example, if a consumer selects the wrong toothpaste because the two toothpastes look similar, it's a vastly different outcome than if a healthcare professional selects and administers a neuromuscular blocking agent, for example, instead of a vaccine. And it's not enough to caution people to read labels more carefully. The error will likely repeat itself unless the underlying reason for the error is resolved. And it's really more about designing clear and legible labels that enable users to find the information they need to use the product safely. So as Wayne said, it's more about designing the technology, or in this case the label and package, to meet the needs of the user, and not asking the user to change their practice or the way they think and so on to interact with the product. In 2012, ISMP Canada did complete an aggregate analysis of errors that we had reported to us to get an overall understanding of labeling and packaging specific issues and some of those systems-based contributing factors. And this analysis did include all incidents that were voluntarily reported to us by both healthcare providers and consumers. And it was from January 1st, 2001 to May 15th, 2012, so a significant number of errors to look at. This included near miss or actual incidents that occurred anywhere along the medication use process. So as I said, from selection off the shelf to dispensing of the product in the pharmacy to direct administration at the point of care. And a search of our databases on the right-hand side of the screen for any report in which labeling, packaging, or naming was cited as a contributing factor did yield over 2,000 reports. And then we applied exclusion criteria to narrow that scope specifically to the incidents involving manufacturer labeling and packaging as a contributing factor. And so I'm going to focus on some of the manufacturer-specific issues. Further analysis of the reports revealed some of these contributing factors involving manufacturer-specific labeling and packaging, and these included things like look-alike issues, issues with how the information was actually laid out on the label, or lack of prominence of some of the key information needed to administer the product safely, readability and legibility issues and comprehension issues of users, lack of cues for differences between products, and use of similar containers or dosage forms for different routes of administration, and the use of abbreviations. And I think these challenges can best be summed up by a quote we received within one of the incident reports from a healthcare provider that I'm sure will resonate with some of you. A lot of concentration is time is required by the user, whether that's a healthcare provider or a consumer, to ensure that they have the correct product in hand. So the next few slides, I'm going to share some of the examples of reported incidents where the actual labeling and packaging were cited as a contributing factor. And this first example involves the accidental IV infusion of sterile water instead of the intended normal saline infusion. And unfortunately, the patient involved received close to 600 mils of the sterile water before the error was discovered when blood was noted in their urine. This patient experienced renal complications as a result of receiving the hypotonic sterile water and required admission to the ICU. And you'll notice that the two bags of solutions actually look very, very similar. The sterile water bag on the right contained a statement that says pharmacy bulk package not for direct infusion. And one could argue that if the provider had simply read the label more carefully, this incident might not have occurred. However, there are many contributing factors that make it easier for a provider to choose the wrong product. And when products not intended for IV infusion are marketed in flexible plastic bags having a similar appearance to IV solutions, then it can lead to this type of substitution error fairly easily. And in this situation, we worked with the manufacturer to design label improvements. And one of the more obvious changes you can see is the change from black print to all red print. And this can serve as a warning to providers. And studies have identified that the use of red actually conveys the highest level of perceived hazard. So in some situations can be quite effective. The words "not for direct infusion" have been given prominence on the new label, and the use of varied font size and a mix of upper and lowercase lettering help to distinguish some of the key information. And you'll notice that the word "water" is now in larger print, and the additional use of the international chemical symbol for water sort of adds a redundant cue that helps to identify the product. Ideally, the use of additional redundant cues, such as using a unique size and shape of container, so not having it look like an IV bag, and making it incompatible with IV tubing might also help to prevent this type of error from occurring. We've also seen multiple reported incidents where consumers have confused a 3% hydrogen peroxide contact lens solution with one containing 0.9% sodium chloride and have used it to rinse their lenses directly before placing them in their eyes. And this product requires neutralization of the 3% peroxide in a special lens cleaning case so that it's safe to put into your eyes. And consumers reported experiencing pain, burning, and redness of the eyes after improperly selecting and using this product, believing it to be a typical multi-purpose contact solution that they use for regular cleaning and soaking of their lenses. And this belief is further aided by the product being available next to the multi-purpose solutions on the store shelves. So in 2012, label enhancements were made to provide guidance to consumers regarding how to use this product safely and to warn them to use the special lens case. However, I will say that since that time, both ISMP Canada and in the US continue to receive reports of similar instances despite these added warnings. So it's suggesting that perhaps just simply a warning itself may not be as effective, and there may be opportunities or further opportunities to consider other human factors or user interface with the product, any other issues to enhance safety and make additional label changes. When labeling and packaging of different strengths of the same product look alike, it can also lead to selection of the wrong product for administration. In this particular incident, a patient received 10 milligrams of morphine from a 10 milligram per mil ampule instead of the intended 2 milligram from a 2 milligram per mil ampule, and subsequently this patient required treatment with Narcan. You'll notice the difference in text color and the colored bands on the two different strengths within a product line. This incident is an example of how sometimes these subtle distinguishing cues are not always enough. You can see that the color difference is actually very subtle, and particularly you can imagine in some lighting that difference may even be more subtle. So consideration to the frequency and urgency of use of these products, how they're actually used in the clinical setting, and how they're stored are really important factors in terms of label design. And you'll notice the enhanced use of color to help distinguish one strength from the other. The addition of enhanced labeling on the side flap, you can see sort of here where you can see the 10 and the 2 very clearly, can also help the user quickly identify the appropriate product strength, whether when the product is stored on a shelf within the pharmacy or the care setting. You'll also notice in this picture that even in the lower lighting on the bottom shelf, the 10 milligram per mil morphine is now more easily distinguished from the 2 milligram per mil. So the next few slides, I'm going to highlight some selected recommendations that, along with the regulatory requirements that manufacturers must meet, should be considered in the design and layout of a health product label. And these practices are really intended to achieve a balance between product standardization and differentiation. And we know that standardization is a strategy that can reduce errors by reinforcing that sort of pattern recognition on which humans rely when they're processing information. However, too much of a good thing can sometimes create problems, and the more label or package characteristics that products have in common, the more likely they can start to look alike as well. So it's a cumulative effect of individual label or package characteristics that can really make it difficult for users to distinguish one product from the other. And one important general principle when designing health product labeling and packaging is this concept of proximity and compatibility. And this principle states that all information relevant to a common task so that people use together when they're performing a specific function should be displayed close together on the label. For example, the name of the product, its strength, its dosage form, and its route of administration are four distinct but very closely related elements that should be ideally placed in close proximity on a label because they're used at the same time to perform functions of drawing up the solution or administering the correct dose and so on. Conversely, the net quantity of a product, for example, the number of mils in this vial, is not really related to this information, and so maybe is best located in a separate location, as you can see in the upper left corner of the label. Confusion errors have been reported when the product strength and the amount in the actual product or package were placed in close proximity to one another because people relate that information together. But it's not only about physical proximity. The use of the same color, type style, point size, any markings or graphics that can link these pieces of information inadvertently together, even when there's physical distance between them, can cause a problem. Illegibility of information is really a known contributing factor in health product-related errors, and interactions between or changes to typographic elements on a label can really affect the legibility and comprehension of the information by the user. A sans serif or non-decorative kind of type style, sort of like Arial or Helvetica, in the largest point size possible for the size of the product label, can enhance legibility of key information on a label. And the use of this larger point sizes can be very challenging, though, for manufacturers, as you can imagine, with small or small volume containers, such as this 2 milligram vial or a 1 ml ampule. And in those types of situations, sometimes using a background color that is significantly different from the type color can actually help. Mixed case lettering in general is preferred, and it's supposed to be a lot more legible or readable for a user. However, you can see in this example that it's, again, how the lettering is used or how the text is used, the color, the background color, the color and contrast between the two that can really make a difference. And so it's really about, again, stepping back, looking at the label and assessing all of it together to see whether or not it's legible to a user. This next example, I think, is a really good example of how label design, and more specifically, the orientation of the text on the label, has been taken into consideration in terms of how the product will be used at the point of care. So this is a bottle of propofol that is often hung on an IV pole, and so the orientation of the text is at the point of administration is kind of critical. And you'll note also that the key information needed to administer the product is actually within the user's field of vision, and they don't really have to adjust the bottle around or turn it a lot to be able to see the information. And so that's a really good thing in terms of usability for the user. Color can be used to draw attention to key information, as we've shown in a few examples, and to help differentiate one product or product strength from another. However, it is really just one of many factors to be taken into account in the design of a health product label, and it really shouldn't be considered in isolation of the other variables. People with normal color vision are able to detect differences between similar colors only when the colors are placed side by side, which isn't often the case in a clinical setting. You often won't have two products side by side or two different strengths of the same product side by side. And without this side by side comparison, similar colors cannot be easily distinguished, and mistakes can be made if the color is the only variable used as a distinguishing feature between the two. Other examples of alternative or complementary techniques to assist in distinguishing one product from another could include things like use of color banding or boxing frames around text, reverse highlighting, bold type, variation in type style or sizes. You can see on this the color contrast between on the lower ampule really helps to read the key information on the label, and ensuring that good contrast between label text and background is another way to use color to enhance legibility. Some color combinations, though, are better than others, and there's been studies showing that black or yellow type on a red background is known to be very difficult to read. White space is also an important aspect of label design. It should really be used as liberally as possible so that users can quickly find the information they need to facilitate safe use of the product. And the white or quiet space, as it's sometimes referred to, because sometimes the space isn't really white, depending on the background color of the packaging. But this white space can create a feeling of openness, can help readers focus on what they're reading, and improve their ability to find and process the information. The white space really helps to reduce the concentration and mental workload required by the user to read and understand the information. It can also be used quite effectively to frame a grouping of text or to separate unrelated information so that it's not processed together, as we talked about earlier. And it can also be used to emphasize key information. The package a product comes in can be an important factor in facilitating its intended and proper use. And the type or format of a container can provide users with an important cue as to the intended route and method of administration of the product. If a container and its format or its appearance looks similar to that of another product intended to be handled differently, errors can occur and serious harm can actually result. And the previous incident we spoke about regarding the administration of sterile water instead of normal saline is one example of this. This second example is from a reported incident involving a substitution error that actually resulted in the inadvertent injection of topical epinephrine. And as you can see from these pictures, the packaging of the topical solution on the right is very similar to the packaging used for the injectable formulation on the left, and even down to the point of consisting of a rubber stopper held in place by a metal ferrule. And this can lead some practitioners to use a needle and syringe to withdraw the topical medication before transferring it to an open container for use. And that in itself increases the risk of an inadvertent injection of the topical product. This next picture shows a box of glucagon, and when opened from one end, this is what the user would see. On the left of the package is what looks like the package insert, and on the right is a syringe. And what happened in this situation is that the user opened from this end and took out the syringe and administered it to the patient, thinking they were administering the glucagon. However, what they were actually administering in this situation was the diluent only. And so you can see, if they had opened the package from the opposite end, it would have been clear that the package actually contained two parts, the diluent and then the active ingredient in the small vial. And when opened from the opposite end, the active ingredient was hidden by the package insert. So it's a good example of how packaging in itself can impact on a user's ability to administer the right product, and highlights the importance of considering some of the challenges faced in the real world by the user and how the product is actually used in the clinical setting when manufacturers are designing health product labeling and packaging. Labeling and packaging of products in blister cells can also result in user confusion, and we've seen this in some of the reported incidents. So blister packaging should really be designed to be consistent with how the product is used, the product information, and the instructions for use. Information should really be provided on each blister cell so that key information, for example, the product strength, is still available after a dose has been removed. You can imagine taking a tablet out of this package on the right-hand side. If you took the right-hand tablet out, it would completely obliterate the 50 milligram strength. And product information shouldn't really be placed across two blister cells because it can be really confusing as to whether the dose intended or the strength of the product is provided in the one tablet or in two tablets. And this is true with regards to the perforations are designed. The perforations that include more than one blister cell can add to this confusion. For example, having two cells within a perforated unit could be interpreted as the contents of the two cells equaling that single 50 milligram dose. So we've talked a lot about principles of designing product labels and packages for safety and how the environment of use can influence how users interact with the health product. And Wayne already spoke to the importance of human factors testing and how it can be used as well by manufacturers of products. An evaluation of the impact of labeling and packaging on safe use of the product through user testing really ideally should be incorporated as early as possible in the product development process. And user testing refers to that broad set of methods used by manufacturers to assess usability, identify problems experienced by users, and develop solutions to eliminate the consequences of these problems, or reduce them at least. And it's really an important tool in terms of label and package design to determine whether the intended user can safely and effectively perform the critical task involved in using the product, or whether they will make errors while doing so, have difficulty, or be unable to use the product at all. It should be considered when it has been identified that there's a heightened risk of harm if the health product is used in error. So some examples of situations that might warrant user testing at the manufacturer level might include during the design of a new product of a label and package, or with significant changes to layout and color of an existing label, or when there are really critical safety issues involved. For example, if a product is fatal if given by the wrong route. So you might say, well, that's fine, Kim, but do the manufacturers have access to all this information? As a complement to the plain language labeling initiative, Health Canada and ISMP Canada have been collaborating on the development of a good label and package practices guide for health product manufacturers and sponsors. And the objective is really to provide direction to industry on how to design safe and clear health product labels and packages based on what we've learned through reported incidents and environmental scans of good practices and from users themselves. An initial webinar was held in November of last year for industry, where we sort of presented some of the selected recommendations from the guide. And then early this year in 2015, a draft of this guide was posted on the Health Canada website for a formal external consultation period. And we're now collating that feedback that we received and considering it in final revisions to the guide. So stay tuned for that. That is coming. So in conclusion, as the first points of interaction between a health product and a user, the label and package play an important role in facilitating safe product use. They should enable the user to quickly find the information they need to use a product safely. And the design of labels and packages should really consider all of these human factors, the needs of the user, the processes of actually using the product, and the environments in which the products will be used. That's just my contact information should anybody have any questions down the road.
All right. Thanks, Kim. Again, great presentation. Lots of really sort of brings to light, every aspect of all of the labeling and everything that we see. As so much thought has gone into, every aspect of the label to try and address all of these sorts of issues and giving the right information and distinguishing between other products and everything. So really great information. The first question that came in was, and maybe we can hear from both of you, they're asking in reference to the quote that was at the beginning of Wayne's presentation from the military person and the blame on human error for these things. How much progress has been made in sort of changing culture away from sort of blaming everything on human error and accepting this concept of designing of the products and the labels and the devices is part of the solution? I mean, has there been any, in your opinion, what kind of progress has been made in changing that kind of culture?
Oh, yeah, I can go first. I would say that in the context of our hospital, that it's certainly improving. I'm seeing that improving really across the country as well. Now I think there still is in some cases a culture of blame that does occur, and it's sort of an evolving change from what I've seen. But our team is involved in incident investigations quite often within our hospital, and we're called in especially when there is a device or technology-related human factors issue. And so I think that does say a lot where we sit on some of the patient safety committees and so forth, because I think there is a recognition that it isn't all about human error, that in fact technology and the design of technology does have a direct effect on these types of errors. So at the sort of local level, I think that does change. As I mentioned before, regulators also do have a very good understanding that human factors and the design of these technologies really does have a significant effect on the use safety of medical device technologies and such. And so FDA understands that certainly when you need to market your devices jurisdictions like Europe as well, you're required to follow human factors processes. So I think in general there is that increasing understanding of that, but we still see in the media cases where individuals are being blamed for incidences where certainly technology or bad design has had a role. So it's not we're not quite at the same maturity as, say, for example, the airline industry, where it's I think they've been following human factors types of processes for a while and really moving blame and have systems to allow for much safer ways of reporting incidences without necessarily feeling that you might be blamed for it. So I think we still have a ways to go, but I think it is improving.
And Kim, your thoughts on that?
Second that, and suggest that it's still an evolving sort of issue, perhaps less so in healthcare than perhaps some other industries. I would echo what Wayne said with regards to regulators. Certainly Health Canada has just released plain language labeling regulations, and they came into effect June 13th, that requires, that really considers the clarity and legibility and so on of the label, and as well have been collaborating with us on the development of this guide. So there's definitely an interest in understanding the perspective from the end user, and it's a sort of an evolving thing.
All right. Another question, this one for Wayne. I believe it was not in the video. I think it was in one of your slides. You showed the different some of the different components of your lab, so the patient rooms and that sort of thing. And you also had the mock-up of the helicopter. And it was a very large sort of military helicopter, I guess. The question is, have you done any work around interfacility type transport of infants and children, like with helicopters such as would be used by Orange or other organizations like that?
So not specifically with transport of air transport type things. We've done some studies of paramedic type environments, but more on ground ambulances and things like that. So, but not with air transport just yet. We do work with some manufacturers that are developing devices that are to be used in transport. So we're currently in discussion with some manufacturers around things like ventilators and so forth that might need to be used in air and so forth. So we do account for that. Sometimes we need to account for some of the space constraints and height constraints and noise constraints that come into play, but we haven't necessarily tested directly around air transport and how that affects all types of technologies, but we have started to do some preliminary research in that area.
All right. And just a reminder for people to type in questions as you think of them, if you have any. So we'd love to hear from the audience your thoughts on how sort of this kind of design impacts you in your workplace, or opportunities you see to improve your safety through designing equipment, etc. While we wait for any questions to come in, we may end up finishing a little bit early if we don't have any questions come in. But
actually, Doug, it's Elaine. If I can pose a question.
Sure, go ahead.
It's it's Kim and Wayne, a little bit different, but I think very much related. From a family engagement perspective, and when it comes to patient safety and unintentional, of course, adverse events, just the whole disclosure and relating it to the great presentation, and I thank you both for those that you gave today. But what are your thoughts in terms of what has been done in the past, and I think we know that there was improvement needed there, what is being done, and how families are being involved, for example, Kim, in the work that you're partnering with Health Canada on, and your work, Wayne, through UHN.
Yeah, so I can sort of try to answer it. I mean, I probably can't directly answer the question because our team isn't really directly involved with patients per se, at least in terms of active care. So I wouldn't have had any specific situations around how to design or how to engage families when incidences do occur. So when we get involved in incidences, they tend to be quite a bit after the fact, and we're really evaluating the interaction between the users of the system and the technology, not as much with family at this stage. So unfortunately, I can't really comment too much on it.
With regards to the guide for labeling and packaging, I can say that we are intending to actually get feedback. We're looking at different ways right now of getting feedback from consumers and families and so on with regard to some of the recommendations and to get their sort of perspective on what we're recommending in terms of the labels and packages and what some of the challenges were. We did look at consumer incident reports as well, so we got a lot of information from those in terms of some of the challenges that consumers do face. So there was some work done in advance and some work ongoing to sort of get their perspective on the table.
Okay. Thank you.
One thing I can add, Elaine, is that when families and caregivers are really part of the sort of intended users of a system, whether that be a pharmaceutical combination product like an injectable or
yeah, and that's the kind of thing I was thinking about, Wayne. Yeah.
We do involve those as end users, and so for example, Kim had talked about a glycogen device, and so we might test something like that, and in those contexts, we look at whether a caregiver, whether that be a family member or a teacher or whoever it might be, is somebody like that type of layperson able to use the system in a sort of high-stress situation or something like that. So we would involve caregivers from that perspective, and so sometimes we do bring in, when we do evaluate systems, representative patients as well as caregivers in order to evaluate the system.
Okay.
All right, we did have a question that came in, and they're asking if we can hear more about how hospitals can better integrate human factors expertise into their safety programs. And I think maybe from the perspective, Wayne, how you mentioned that you've often been brought in on a project basis, or there's been an incident and something specific needs to be addressed, but perhaps your ideas of how we can integrate that expertise on a day-to-day basis in safety programs within hospitals?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I can talk, and maybe it helps to talk a little bit about how we did it here at UHN. It was kind of an evolutionary thing, and it did start off when we had an individual that had some human factors knowledge, and I think the basis of the work really was, how can we bring in technology? We consume a lot of, obviously healthcare technologies here at UHN, and sometimes we spend, significant amounts of money on it, and so as part of the procurement, we started to think a little bit about human factors. So what about human factors or the design of these systems that you need to consider when buying systems? So we started running comparative human factors evaluations on shortlisted products. So let's say an infusion pump procurement or anesthesia gas machines or whatever. We would actually bring in representative nurses to come in to evaluate the shortlisted products in a comparative or usability benchmark study. So we incorporated some level of human factors into the procurement process. So if you can actually do real testing, that's fantastic. If not, can you add to some of the line items some of these questions around whether they've considered human factors in their process and have them showed some of the data. I think that's one way of doing it. Once we sort of had some additional team members here, we started to provide some human factors education to our hospital, so to nurses, to caregivers, to stakeholders in different in wards and other aspects of environments in the hospital. And so we do provide that sort of education to other hospitals as well. And so I know that not all hospitals necessarily have budget to have human factors people on staff, so sometimes we do provide that as well, and sort of provide the education and such. We sort of grown to a size of 25 or 30, but we're not operationally funded, so we're pretty much self-funded through the research that we do, through the engagements we have with manufacturers and such, through our sort of more commercial kind of consulting activities, and so that's how we end up funding ourselves and then being able to pay for the less, let's say, profitable types of activities, by paying it through some of the profitable things that we do. So we do look inwardly to sit in some of those patient safety boards and incident investigations into procurement. We do work with some of our IT organizations as they develop new software that's internally focused, to get us involved in some of the usability work as much as possible. But ultimately, in order to fund it, we do have to look externally, but we want to be there anyways because that's where we can have the greater influence in terms of the design of technologies working directly with manufacturers. That said, we've actually had a lot of communication with other organizations, other hospitals across the country, and human factors. It seems to be a bit of a growing discipline within some of the hospitals that we were encountering, and a lot of the starting point often does relate to procurement, and because that's often where lots of money is spent, there's budgets to be had to sort of affect big capital purchases and such. So I'm not sure if I'm entirely answering the question, so if there's a follow-up, I'm happy to provide more input there.
Another question about the difference between sort of human factors and lean implementations. They mentioned that there's lots of hospitals that are implementing lean, and they go through these simulation processes and that sort of thing where they map out flow and the sort of the human element of the designing a physical space like a patient room. Is human factors part of that? Is it sort of the same concepts just from different approaches? Is human factors embedded in the lean process, or?
Yeah, I have to admit I'm not an expert in lean, but certainly from my exposure to it, there is some, certainly there's a lot of consistency in terms of some of the methodology there. I think some of the differences are, taking a very focused human factors approach. There is a particular focus on users throughout the process in terms of there's very specific methodologies around collecting data through observational type of research, and that's not necessarily dissimilar from lean, but the objectives are somewhat different, but I think a lot of the approaches are similar, and the objectives in some ways are related as well. But they're not exactly the same thing, but the focus of human factors is really on the end user and looking at using specific human factor methodologies like ethnography, usability testing, and so forth. But again, I'm not an expert in lean, so I probably can't comment exactly where the precise differences are. But we've certainly worked in projects that also incorporated lean, and we focused in on the specific human factors components of it. But unfortunately, I can't answer the specific questions around the exact differences.
I think considering the user and that concept of considering the user and the environments of use or the processes involved is really an important principle in any improvement method or any improvement methodology you use, whether it's lean, whether it's the model for improvement, PDSA cycles, and so on. It's really important in terms of improvement to understand things from the end user's perspective and really get their input into the design of processes or improvements related to whatever it is you're hoping to improve on. So I think the concepts are sort of interwoven.
Right.
Yeah, it definitely sort of goes back to where Wayne started the session with the various quotes about it's easier to change technology than to change people and the user-centered design and that sort of thing. So no, definitely a great comment, Kim. Thank you. So I think we're out of questions here from the audience, unless you have any last-minute questions that you want to whip in and off your keyboard in the next few seconds. I think we'll wrap this up with, and maybe we can just get some final closing comments from Wayne and Kim before we sign off. So Wayne, why don't you go first? Oh, it sounded like I heard the door squeak there. It sounded like Wayne might have left.
So I had to close or somebody was trying to come in.
Okay. Well, perfect timing.
I may have missed your last question there, Doug. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I was just saying I think we're out of questions. I was giving everyone a chance to type in a last-minute question, which hasn't come in yet. So I think we're going to wrap it up. And I was just asking if there's any closing comments you'd like to end off with, and then we'll go over to Kim for the same.
Well, I just want to open it up that, Doug, I think you provided my contact information, so I'm happy to follow up with any additional questions that people may come up with afterwards. People can also take a look at our website to see some of the projects that we're involved in and give you a bit of a sense of what we're doing here at Healthcare Human Factors. So it's just humanfactors.ca, but I think that's provided as part of the speaker information anyways. But again, it's humanfactors.ca if people are interested.
All right, thank you. And yes, we'll definitely put that information on the Knowledge Exchange Network on the page that you can see on the screen right now down near the bottom. There'll be contact information and links to the website and everything else, so people can certainly get in touch with you if they have any other questions. All right, Kim, any closing thoughts from you?
Oh, no, just that I guess healthcare professionals and consumers do face a lot of challenges, as we all know. And in terms of my part of the presentation, in terms of reading labels and packages and using the large number of health products out there on the market safely. And so anything that we can do to make that easier for them and to enable them to get the information they need to use the product safely would be of benefit. And in line with that is the importance of understanding what some of those challenges are and some of the human factors involved in how they're actually using the product. It's I think, really, really important.
All right, thank you. All right, well, thank you to both of you. Fantastic presentation, and really the concept of this patient safety series is to really bring patient safety to the masses, not just make it the domain of those folks that work in it on a day-to-day basis, but really help everyone in healthcare understand that the various pieces that go into our improving safety for the children and families that we serve in the organizations across Canada. So I think you've really given them a taste of some of the. It's not always just about, as I still go back to the comments from, or the quotes from Wayne's presentation at the beginning from that military officer about you just have to do better, you have to pay more attention. It's more than that. There's lots of opportunities to improve safety. So thanks for really highlighting some of these issues. We do these webinars every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and it's always great if you can watch live. As you can see, your questions and comments really enhance the presentation and the discussion. So, but if you can't watch live, we do record these sessions and make them available on the Knowledge Exchange Network. In a couple of weeks on the page that you can see on the screen there, we will have, or in a couple of days on the page on the screen, you will see the video will pop up. You can watch it again or go over any parts that you missed or share it with whoever you'd like. And over the next few weeks, I usually say we have a great lineup of webinars over the next few weeks, but we don't. We have a 3-week break for the next few weeks. We've got a lot of holidays falling on Wednesdays, so next week is St. Jean-Baptiste Day, then followed by that is Canada Day, and then I'm on vacation for a week. So we'll be back on July 15th, and some more information on those webinars coming soon in the CAFC Presents email newsletter that you can always go to our website and sign up for. But I do, because this is a patient safety series, I do want to make sure everyone knows that in addition to our Wednesday CAFC Presents webinars, we do have a monthly patient safety collaborative webinar, the fourth Friday of every month. And on June 26th this month, they will be joined by Donna Kohler and Morgane Lepoussard from a joint program with Sick Kids and Ryerson University, where they'll be talking to children about medical errors, stakeholder perspectives, where they are going to have a conversation about disclosure of errors, and in particular when the patient is a child. How much do you disclose to them? How much do they even really want to know? And what's the family's perspective on all of this? So it's going to be a really interesting presentation there on the Friday, June 26th. So lots of a great presentation for the Patient Safety Collaborative coming up, and we'll be getting some more information about coming webinars in the next few days. And hopefully we'll see you back in a few weeks when we get back on schedule. All right, thanks again for coming, and we'll see everyone next time. Bye.